for you. When you start working with this kind of light work, you don't start off at the end. You work sequentially up in it so you don't fry. So you get a whole lot. It's why we have another part of our synergic team, the Ascended Masters that work with us, the angels and so forth. They're part of our team. And they're the ones that knows what's going on. And we assume that we don't know anything. That's where we begin to be useful. So the first thing, sitting here listening or in the group work, your best action is to forget everything you've ever learned. Now about 5% of it will be useful Metatronic information. And that's why you had your experiences to do that. The Metatronic wisdom then moves forward to create the future, which is already there, but it's dynamic and it's always growing. So we work across time, these various projects, religions, cultures, and so forth. And that generates a small bit of Metatronic wisdom. But most of it was aligned to existence in this Oratronic fallen universe, where we only have a two-strand DNA, and we have gravity and a lot of disagreeable illnesses and things like that. So the Earth is streaming out a constant coding to the surface and all the inner Earth realities too at the same time. And a lot of times we'll pick up that hum. And sometimes it's a thud or a clank or a bang. When there's a buffer up on the surface consciousness that usually people don't hear, but it's very close in the etheric range. So a lot of times people do, particularly if our time continuum, the definitions of time are breaking down or shifting. Many people are more used to it. We're being exposed to a higher level of energy at that time, but it's safe. Now, the Montauk people, when they're dealing with the time, particularly when they shifted out here to the Taos area, everybody in about 4 states was hearing that hum. They figured it was some sort of a government project, so they demanded a hearing in Congress or investigation to check it out and wanted an explanation. Governors interested in it and pressed for it. So it was a big deal back then. Also, when you fiddle with time in their range, you get what's called time storms. Very intense storms. You continue off, your teleplanes are phase matching, and that gets a whole lot of activity in all planes in between them in this teleplane. And so that might get a series of, back then when they were doing it, they were flooding the Midwest area and the whole continent for a couple months. So anyway, this Tacoma hum is more pronounced nowadays. It's more discernible.
Is it a time storm, or is this something that's coming from the center of the Earth? Or what are we talking
The
about?
time storm is when the definitions of time are being shifted. It can be shifted on purpose, or with the Montauk people, they're not very, they're not that smart. They really don't know what's happening, but so they don't really know the science. So in their fooling around, breaking down the time definitions with their experiments and projects, that impacts the streaming, it impacts the buffer zone mainly. It makes it unstable. in terms of consciousness. So that in turn, when they're with their time stuff, they're bringing in other realities, time continua, that are phase matching. Now when that happens, then the buffer effect is minimized, and we begin to hear the tones. The tones are good. They're programming, are in an ascension, evolution, overall programming. So that doesn't necessarily have a direct impact on the creation of the storms. It's the breaking down of the definitions and bringing those continuum into a phase match that creates a storm. The potentials are transferring back and forth, and then it gets down into the physical, etheric range.
Are you saying that the storms, like the hums that were heard back east and the governors were interested in, are you saying that those were time storms or part of the Atoma?
No, that wasn't. That was the Atoma. But they were also getting rainstorms, and that was an effect, but it wasn't that violent effect, because they weren't really that closely matched. But it was enough that there was getting a thunderstorm activity, generating higher storm, but not really up in the super typhoon range.
You mentioned pops, hearing pops, and as the hum's coming through, you might hear a pop or something like that as it enters the consciousness. Did I hear that right?
I think, yeah. Pop, static, sometimes clanks, bangs, isn't a steady hum.
Bangs,
but it's
loud.
Remembering that this is a sort of a phase matching situation going on, and so it's basically unstable. So you get more of a static in the line, I guess. Okay, anyway, got to march on here. For you scientific people, that's the explanation of that nuclear universe or ultra-fun. And if you want to look at that at your leisure, why it's open on the, I have a website where I stick all these things I've been using for email. Now I have to shift over to a real site. But anyway, it's available later.
Next.
This is an example of the L, or the rhombic time gate. It's you can zoom in a little bit more, I think. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I wanted some examples of this rhombic time gate, or L shift. This is from the Lindisfarne Gospels. About the 4th century or 5th. Here we have a Celtic knot arrangement, and it's divided into sections. Here's 2, then there's 4, and then 2, and then 1. In Hebrew, 2, 4, 2, 1, Bad Ba, translates down to the coming and going, or an operation of the gateway. It's a little bit more, when you put the word meanings together, it gives you a little bit more information on it. But back then they knew full well what a time gate was and how it operated. It's interesting that they're using the Celt format with the Judeo-Christian. If you go back far enough, there's connections. Here we have the Eden tree with a serpent coated in it. Up here, it's hard to see with all the lines, but in this area, if you look at it from one way, you see a bird. If you look at it from another way, you see a whale. And you also, with the serpent bird symbolism, you have what's called the staff of Asclepius. It's also a constellation. Ophiuchus, and people think that that's the 13th sign, but it isn't, according to Thoth. When that staff, the bird serpent staff of creation, also heals, and that is activated, mastered, then it opens the 13th sign, which is the cetacean, or Delphinus in Capricorn, is the 13th sign. And that synthesizes all 12. So that's what this thing does. The bird connects in and it becomes a whale. So anyway, that's so we have this particular staff here with the golden ratio where it forms here and here, 5 square. This is 1/2 of the rhombus. The other half is down below. This is a study in different rings or systems that this thing creates. A 20-pole ring is in this, and with a 20-pole ring it's called geochronism. You're getting very strong resonance between whatever's going on and the planet itself. So when you see that, particularly in crop formations and how they work, which we see quite often, we're getting a very strong resonance. We have a handout on geochronism. It's a really important thing to have. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Any questions about that, by the way? Okay, go ahead. That's the rhombus effect. There are two that work together, and in the pillar of the Solomon temple, it has an example. One rhombus would be on the left would be the Boaz pillar. The other pillar is the Yachem, and that is a polarized system we use in light work too. Now those two pillars, though you activate those things using the rhombic implosion, that opens the gate to any time, any place, any event, any universe where you need to go. And it does it safely and accurately. Now the thing is, with those two pillars, there's a third one in the middle. Well, that's where the action is. Two sets you up in a certain field, and then that permits you then to activate the center one. So in the Rochelle system, you find these installed as part. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Okay, that is 1/2 of the Rochelle grid. This lists different systems in it. Right here. We have a grail, there's a golden ratio, well, okay, here we have the Great Pyramid dynamic. There's a teledisk or plane across here. This is a cup that creates a grail reality system. This thing flashes into existence constantly. This is the thing that organizes the consciousness states of being constantly in this flashing universe. That's the overall thing that's working here. So it has these systems that key in a sequence, correct sequence, for creating this kind of a metatronic reality. And then it discreates that when it pulls apart in this flashing cycling on constantly, and it's using this thing to constantly keep up to date and regenerate reality. So the teleplane in this thing is this plane right here. So all these systems here are the thing that generates the new reality constantly in this plane here. There's actually two of them there. It's a little bit more complicated. Okay, so the Grail and also the Great Pyramid. There's the equilateral triangle, which creates the star tetrahedron. Then there's a 5-pointed star, or universal seeding system. There are other things too, and I don't want to take the time, but this is just to introduce you to a Metatronic breastplate or system. Metatron has 24 breastplates or systems for operating all the universes. So this is the third one, but it includes several others. The pyramid is actually part of a large cube, and the midden chamber is the, or middle of the cube sphere, is where the main action is. So, particularly if you've been studying Maya's material, taught about pyramids, the midden chamber is where you start getting the ascension dynamics and the real action all centers, literally, in that area. Now, just in passing, well, I'll be getting into it in the next 5 days. This pyramid, the Great Pyramid, temple of all temples, has been radically upgraded by the crop missions in this season into something called the Ra Star 2000. And that is a major upgrade, that's all I'll say at this point. But it was necessary for the Sha-Lura. This system, with the Ra Star upgrade, that there's a grid that spans, by the formation, spans Italy, France, and up into the UK. In the UK, the formations have built a smaller model, but it spans about halfway across a new system.
Is that in Wiltshire?
Hmm?
Is that in Wiltshire too in England? Where in England? Do you know?
Yeah, in fact, I'll show it to you in the Beuhler eventually. It's north of Beuhler, but it's connected. All right.